She may realize death, but who knew she would die as an offering? Elaine Newt. She is widely known as a religious and good-natured girl, thus honored as the savior of the Empire. So now she is chosen as the next victim for the wicked dragon Rebes. If only she could have known how it would all end. She wouldn't have put up with all that had happened to her so far. Why she had to hold on and suffer. Still, how long will she have to wait, and where is that evil dragon finally? There was a loud sound. Elin looked up. "He's here," she said. This dragon was huge, with blue eyes, wings, and 2 horns, and smoke coming out of its mouth. When Elin looked at it, she thought it was very big. She closed her eyes and began to ask all the gods that she might die without suffering. The dragon that opened its eyes was also standing in front of her. Who would have thought she would live long enough to see such a thing? The dragon extended his claw to the hair of her face. He sort of wanted to say something with it. "They've already met, haven't they?" Looking at the girl with his blue eyes. She was always told she had a terrible fate. She believed this would be the worst day of her life. Or she used to, until she met Rebes. A few days earlier, a man's voice had sounded in the favela temple, in the dining room for the poor. "For the sake of all the saints, where is she?" he repeated. "In the dining room," a girl's voice rang out. "Holy Father," she said. The girl waved her hand, said she was here delivering food. What could she do to help? "When you're done serving the dishes, go. You need to go to the laundry room to help. They need more free hands there, shepherd." Well, the girl had so much to do here. She also had 200 dishes to serve, and then she had to wash at least 400 plates. "Why don't you help them yourself, Father?" said the girl. Indignantly, the Holy Father replied that he was not the right person to do such a job. "You mean by that kind of work?" Elaine asked. "Father, you became a priest because you wanted to follow God's decrees, didn't you? In that case, you don't think you're going to live and work in comfort, do you? Did Bera teach us to live at a leisurely pace, reciting psalms? If he insists on Elaine going to the laundry, at least he should be handing out food instead." Father had already said that he was not the right man to do such a job, at which point he threw a plate at him with the words, "Hurry up and give us food." Elin smiled and said, "Don't throw plates. I'm going to give you all everything now. Here you go," and quickened her pace in distributing the food. "That's enough," shouted the Holy Father. "After all, he's a busy man. So someone else." Elin continued to distribute food to the poor people, but she felt very frustrated that the same people were always working while the others were fooling around. Everyone could stand together and help each other. When Elin finished feeding all the poor people, she managed to wash all the dishes and even the laundry, saying that she was done for the day. Elin wanted to go to rest, but then some voices came from the dining room. One man shouted to another that he could eat less because he was smaller in stature. But the smaller man shouted, "Let go, it's mine!" Running into the dining room, Elin asked the smaller guy to let go because he was weaker. "Otherwise, she will make sure not to be seen in the refectory if they don't stop fighting." The guy who was taller and stronger asked, "What is she anyway?" Not confused, she said she was a sister of the favela temple, Elaine Newt, and she would have to take it as an act of insult to the nobility. The noble's sister interjected, "A guy who is stronger and taller would work in a place like this. You don't seem to know what an insult to nobility is yet." Ellen immediately reached into her pocket and started pulling out the crest pendant. With the words, "Why should she lie?" and also "he" or "she," showed a pendant which bore her coat of arms. The boy who saw this was frightened and immediately cried out, "My God, he's asking for forgiveness. He has never seen nobles working in such a place. It's his fault." But Elin was calm and nonchalantly said without raising her voice, "If he does that again and she is true, I'll make sure he's never seen here again." The guy understood everything clearly and calmed down. People standing around paid attention to this suspension, talking among themselves. Like one of them said, "What is this pendant?" And the other replied, "This pendant is called the Emblem of the Faithful. It is a badge of honor worn by the believing nobility to distinguish themselves." Really, he wondered why knowing would work here. Those words never left Elaine as she walked away, she reflected. The girls sat and washed a lot of plates. They were so thoroughly scrubbing them that one of them had numb hands. Well, they still had over 100 plates to go. Their thoughts were that it would never end. Their backs were hurting. It's the end of the year at the free soup kitchen for the poor. There are only 5 of them left, that they have to cook, serve, and clean up afterwards. Elin told them that she was very grateful for the hard work. In order for them to relax, they need to finish washing the dishes only by the end of the day. There is no need to rush. Elin was approached by the sisters, washing dishes with her. Can you imagine what they will do when Elin leaves? After all, her tenure at the cathedral ends this year. It's been 10 years since Elin came to this cathedral. She'll be leaving them in a week. She doesn't want to leave either. Well, the sisters countered that she had nothing to regret. They wanted to say that they were happy to be with her. Knowledge usually stays here for years to study religion, but Elin stayed for 5 more years. Their family. Hasn't there been news from Earl Newt? But there was no news. The sisters were indignant among themselves. Why did they bring it up? And Elin became sad, overcome by memories. 10 years ago she was told she would be the one to go to the temple. She was very surprised and asked again, will she go? After all, she knows that at least one child from each noble family must serve in the temple for at least 5 years. Damon was originally supposed to go there, but he's the second heir to the Newt family. He still has a lot to learn, so Elin will go in his place. After all, she should be grateful that the family accepted her, despite the fact that she is an illegitimate child from an illegitimate family branch. So, she needs to go and serve for 5 years. But after she had stayed 5 years, no one came to take her away. The Newt family left her for another 5 years beyond the 5 years she had already stayed. Well, it was for the best, she thought. She was fine there. She thought as soon as she finished her 10 years of service in the temple, she would pack her things and leave without saying anything. Newton would run away somewhere far away and start a new life, a life as free as she could be. The sisters sitting in the garden, and Elin noticed that for some reason the sky had darkened. They noticed that it was so dark that it was overcast. Elin was worried, she wondered. Maybe there was a huge fire starting somewhere and someone needed to be rescued. I wondered, looking up at the sky. It seemed to her that some huge bird was flying at her, but unfortunately she was wrong. It was the same dragon with the blue eyes. Everyone was very frightened. Eileen was as calm as ever, saying, it was just the sisters were in a panic, screaming, "What is it? What is this monster?" The dragon from his mouth spoke these words. "Hear me, you people who are full of lies and pride. You must pay for your sins, for your humiliation and for sealing the creatures of the sacred for the last 500 years. In 3 days you will perish under the oppression of black flames." When the sisters looked closer at the dragon, they realized that it was the wicked dragon Rabis. "The unholy dragon Rabis has returned," Elin said. "The unholy dragon Rabis is the 44th dragon to appear in the Empire's history, and the last and only dragon to return 500 years ago. Rabis wreaked havoc throughout the Empire, causing its inhabitants and his unholy dragon to shake with fear. Eventually he was sealed by the greatest mage, Lancer Aquinal, and disappeared from history. Now, 500 years later, the announcements of the impending doom of the Empire that came just after his return proved that he is still offended by past human deeds. One day before the appointment of Elin as a sacrifice, called the High Priest Johann Favelo, who was seated on the throne of the Emperor, called the High Priest Favelo and asked him, "Where are the sacred knights?" And all the knights were sent to the southern regions of the Empire due to the sudden activity of the monsters, the priest replied. This answer did not please the Emperor. Well, the priest sent an urgent order to reform some of them to the capital, but even the fastest knight would have a hard time getting here in 3 days. The Emperor was very much perturbed by the reliability of this sealing ritual. What, that dragon came back after all these years? The priest himself, of course, could not have imagined that the dragon seal would break just on his kind, and he would have to solve it all. All this time they had been collecting the bones of some unknown person, calling them the relics of Lancer Aquinal, and worshipping them as relics. They claimed they could maintain the seal of the unholy dragon. They used them as an excuse to make believers of the nobility, and to charge the imperial court for guarding the seal. At this rate, the Emperor will take his head off before the unholy dragon destroys the entire empire, the priest pondered. What should he do now? As the priest sat pondering what he should do, a girl entered the room. "Your Holiness," she said she had read books about dragons, for she cares for the empire, and had found one way to pacify the dragon. When the priest looked up, he saw Lauren, the girl's name. The priest would like to hear this method, whatever it may be, is girls. Last year when the dragon of those years showed up, probably taxed it with human sacrifice. When the sacrifice was made, with treasures that the dragon liked, he would soon calm down after devouring that person and return to the lair with the jewels. Human sacrifice, the priest reflected. It's definitely worth a try, he thought. The people on death row, we can pick any of them we want. But Lorraine said they can't sacrifice anyone to any criminal. Instead, they must offer him a girl and a loyal one. The priest became indignant. What are you saying, that we should sacrifice a holy sister? Lauren said she saw in the books that offered a beautiful and pure girl as a sacrifice. Well, which sister would agree to be such a sacrifice? Lauren replied, This is an emergency situation for the entire empire. Couldn't His Imperial Majesty and Your Holiness make a decree and choose someone? But the question was, still, who should be chosen? Lauren suggested an option. To choose from among the sisters the one who has neither parents, sisters, nor brothers. This girl might be perfect for the role of victim. Ideally, someone who is versed in the scriptures and understands the sacred significance of her sacrifice. And it's better to look among grown women than little girls. The priest wondered, who could fit all these descriptions? Like Elin Newt, Lauren said. She's perfect for the role. Perhaps the Earl of the Newton family has already agreed to this? The priest asked. Of course he has agreed, replied Lauren. Besides, the imperial court knows that this is a heavy sacrifice for the Newton family, beyond a sense of duty. It's a human sacrifice. Everyone will be able to buy enough time until the knights return. And when they return, everyone will be confident that they will have defeated the dragon, Your Holiness. To which the priest replied that it was evident the future Earl of Newton had found himself a remarkably shrewd wife, and it was all about Lorraine. The priest thanked Lauren and wrote the ordinance, the day of Elin's appointment as a sacrifice. Elin Newt, known as a devout and kind girl, thus honored as the savior of our empire. Therefore, you have now been chosen as the next sacrifice for the wicked dragon Rabus. So you're saying because she lived in the faith and was kind, she was victimized just because of that. But Elin was asked to take it as the greatest honor, they as a punishment. That she, the most devoted and among all the faithful, was therefore so honored. Of course, they did their best to make the great sacrifice of the Holy Sister, for the sake of future generations. When the girls were left alone, the conversation about how Lorena had always despised Elin for so long, and now she got what she wanted. But Lorena didn't just get what she wanted. Turns out, Lars' husband's neuter game were just happy to hear the news. It really surprised Elin that she thought it was impossible. Lars was the only one of the Newton family who didn't piss her off, who always listened to her when she needed to. There's no way he's happy about this news, Elin thought. As Elin was led through the whole place, which was very crowded, people were discussing, as usual. They couldn't think, what? Are they really going to sacrifice this girl? Doesn't she look grown up? Locked the palace carriages in a cage in front of everyone's eyes for all to see. When Elin looked, she saw her uncle and Lars in the crowd, but in reply she heard that she was a silly girl. Which is what she was crying for, said her uncle. She must show the spirit of the Newtons that she is doing this for the good of the empire and all people, and she dare not show them such a pathetic look on her face in tears. But Elin was very much angered by these words. She could not believe that it was her uncle who was saying such things. Uncle has to leave for a while to meet some messenger, and Lars will be alone with her. Elin looked at Lars, but didn't recognize him. There was certain he would never have left her. All she could hear him say in response was that he was excited for her to be a part of something big, to being sold as a second wife to some old nobleman. He's sure that's more the fate she deserves. Lars turned around and walked away, but Elin kept yelling after him and couldn't believe that he had changed his mind about her. She was sure that Lars would save her. She had placed all her hopes and strength in Lars, but it had not been realized. The voice of a guard sounded that they should move out immediately. Standing in the crowd, Uncle and Lars were talking among themselves. Said it was Lorena's brilliant idea. Could have gotten rid of that useless girl to the best advantage. And once the dragon retreats, they will be able to use the fact that one of their family members has been victimized to demand substantial compensation from the Imperial Palace Temple. And Lars and Lorena will attend every social gathering they are invited to, and show everyone how devastated they were after this valiant donation. A devastated Lars, rather than watch another man steal Elin from him, would prefer that fate for her. In the present day, the dragon keeps turning to Elin and talking about how they already... Well, she's too lazy to answer that she doesn't recall it. And the fact that she tries to pretend she doesn't know the dragon, but she knows he's the great Lord of Rabis. And read it in a history book, she doesn't seem to realize that she was the person who broke his seal. She was the one who broke the seal of Lord Rabis. The dragon soul turns back into an egg once it is sealed. It takes blood and tears to break that seal. Her blood and tears fell on the egg in which the dragon was sealed, and this allowed it to be released. But Elin doesn't remember ever breaking the seal of Lord Rabis. She apologizes profusely. But a lot of time has passed in human years. Perhaps she really has forgotten. But the dragon has no doubt at all that she is the person who freed him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to see the mark on her forehead. That mark is visible to him as bound to her and the other monsters. No wonder she didn't know about it. Lars didn't understand who she was connected to, or what contract he was talking about. Well, it means about the one who frees the dragon from the seal makes a contract with him. And then what happened to her is also connected to her. Well, the dragon was surprised that the people of the current era didn't know about it. The dragon grants her 3 wishes as her debtor. He must fulfill them, or she must live as long as she is given to be free of the contract. So his dear man, name your first wish. This means that she contacted the dragon contract without her own knowledge, and was the one who awakened the doom of the Empire. She was sure she was asleep now, and must be passed out before boarding the carriage. She just couldn't believe it. Well, still, she gathered, she should be more brave. She sleeps and decided to check with the dragon to see if there was any difference in the kind of wish she would make. A few restrictions, but a lot can come true if it involves her, the dragon replied. Then her first wish, too, was that he not destroy the Empire. With that wish, she could take responsibility for awakening that destruction. Very surprised that she doesn't want him to destroy them, and he's pissed. Elin was very excited about her pissing him off. He could be angry, he had a right to be, as long as she stopped him from getting revenge. And in that same instant, she heard, "Execute." He would destroy the Empire. Then she would be all alone, which would be pretty useless, dragon. And he was right about that, Elin told him. Then we must make sure the dragon refrains from destroying the Empire while she lives. Elin, of course, wanted to hear, forever. Didn't the dragon say that the wish should be about her? Not what would happen to the world after her death should concern her? Elin was fine with that. She thought it wasn't bad at all. She wanted to make him angry, so that he would refuse to grant her wishes at all, and confirmed that as long as she was alive, he wouldn't do anything. Just so she knows, for the sake of fulfilling her wish, the dragon will first have to rid itself of the unholy energy it has been storing up in its body. Therefore, the dragon has no choice but to go back to the beginning. Elin was very interested in the question, "What do you mean, back to the beginning?" Rabis said that now he had to fulfill her first wish. The girl did not realize what was happening. Everything around her became bright. Elin was very scared, so she closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she felt something change. The girl sat on the grass and thought that something was wrong. When she opened her eyes to look around to see where she was, a rock flew into her head. 2 kids praised the guy who threw the rock, saying he made a great throw and hit it right on target. When Elin looked at them, she couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't want to believe that this was really happening. She rubbed her forehead and found that she was bleeding. But Elin realized it was her from the days when she could barely get enough to eat in Count Newt's mansion. But the girl didn't understand how, and more importantly, why she was back in Newt's garden. She was born fatherless in the country home of the Newt family, when her mother, who was herself the illegitimate child of a past earl, brought her home without her husband. Elin was dubbed a stain on the Newt homeland, as the illegitimate daughter's illegitimate granddaughter. And after her birth, her mother grew weaker and passed away when Alina was 7 years old. Count Newt accused her of killing her own mother. My wife said it was a backwater wench who died after giving birth to a nasty baby like Elin. The new head of the family and his wife despised the girl, so her cousins got away with torturing her. Every day of Elin's life was filled with innumerable injuries and bruises from their attacks. It was her 16th birthday, she remembered. Congratulations, they just hurt more like any other day. It would be better if Elin went back to the days when she lived in the temple. She may have been beaten, but at least she had 3 meals a day. Elin didn't understand the reason why she had come back on this particular day. Suddenly, the stone that had struck her forehead began to crack. As the girl continued to ponder her life, a small black dragon appeared from the stone. The dragon shook and said this was the third time this had happened, but the shell still annoyed him just as much. Elin looked at him carefully and said that he must be the Lord of Rabis. The dragon said that was correct, and called her his human partner. Rabis then asked if she remembered where and when they had first met. Elin said she remembered the day, but she was sure he hadn't appeared right in front of her. The dragon explained that it was because it took too long to hatch after being sealed for so long. Rabis was sure it didn't take long. She had probably just run off then when he got out. Elin remembered that moment and realized that she had cried on the ground for a while then got up and walked straight to the mansion. The girl realized now that the stone Martin had thrown at her was a dragon egg. Rabis confirmed and said that if that human child had given the egg his tears and blood, it would be he who would be its partner, not the girl. The dragon asked if he could guess her second wish, and after that he said, "Please kill the people who bullied me, right?" Elin was surprised and said that was wrong and asked that he not kill anyone. Rabis was surprised. He didn't understand why she didn't want it. After all, the children had attacked her first. The dragon asked, "Why doesn't the girl get mad at them?" Elin said that she couldn't kill everyone around her just because she was mad at them. Rabis said it only applies to those who don't have the power to do so. Then he remembered that he had forgotten to say something. He moved closer to her and told her that as long as they were bound by a pact, then she could borrow some of his power, which meant she could kill whoever she wanted. Elin said that even so she wouldn't do it. The dragon was surprised and asked, "Why?" He assumed that she didn't want to waste her desire on these people. Then Rabis said he wouldn't count it as a wish when she borrowed some power to kill a couple people. Also told her to think of the opportunity as a bonus. Elin, yes, I am outraged. He talks like he's selling something in a shop. I used to think dragons were supposed to be sacred animals, but he's acting like a child. The way he talks about wish fulfillment is very suspicious. It also seems to the girl that his mannerisms have changed slightly since the first time they met. Acting so bossy and yet like a little kid. The girl suggested that it might be because he was younger now. Then Elin told him that if she killed everyone who hurt her by pouring out, there would be no one left around her. But Rabis still didn't understand what the problem was. There would still be a lot of people left, even if she killed some of the people around her. Elin replied that the imperial court would then send knights to arrest her, and she didn't want to be involved in something so difficult. After listening to the girl, Rabis said that she just needed to become an empress then, and he would definitely be able to fulfill such a wish. And at that moment, the dragon conjured up all the jewelry that empresses wear. But Elaine, taking off her crown, said she didn't want to become one. Her original wish was that he not destroy the world. The girl didn't understand why he had then transported them to that time if her desire was completely different. Rabis said it was just the quickest and easiest way. Elaine didn't know what he was talking about. The dragon realized he wasn't strong enough when he decided to destroy the country. It was then that he added something else to his magic to make up for it, so it would increase his power. Elaine interrupted him and asked, "What does other mean?" Rabis said, simplifying it. She could think of it as devilish powers. When you replenish your strength with other magic, it becomes very difficult to restrain your instincts for destruction. But the girl still didn't understand what he was getting at. Then the dragon explained that if he wanted to contain himself and not destroy the empire, he would have to purify his magic from the influence of the other. But that would take some time, about 200 years. The girl was very surprised to hear that amount of time. Rabis said that was why he said it was the easiest way. It was much easier to go back to a time when his magic wasn't contaminated. He swung his paw, and all of the emperor's clothes began to disappear. At this point, Elaine still didn't understand what he was even saying. The girl had almost gotten to the point where freedom was one step away from her, and now she would have to live through those horrible times again. Elaine didn't understand what God's sins were for, and at that moment she cried again. After a little thought, she realized that she had suffered in her past life because she didn't know a better life. But now everything has changed. So she hoped that now she could live a different life. Thinking about it, she asked the Lord of Rabes if he would stay with her. Dragon asked what she was talking about. Was she really thinking about dumping him one more time? Elaine understood, and asked who told him she was going to dump him. Rabbis said she did that last time. He tried so hard to get out of the egg and look around, and in the end, when he got out, there was no one around. Elaine presented this picture and immediately said that she hadn't abandoned him, she just didn't know he was there. At that moment, the dragon laughed. The girl didn't understand why he was laughing, and Rabbis said he was just kidding and advised her not to be so serious. But in any case, Rabbis would always be at her side until he granted all 3 of her wishes. With those words, he sat on her shoulder. But Elaine was worried because people might be frightened when they saw him. But Rabbis told her not to worry, for she was the only one who could see him now. The sun was already beginning to set as Elaine and her dragon walked towards the mansion. The girl asked, "Right now, Lord Rabes's magic is not contaminated by anything, right?" The dragon confirmed her words. Elaine suggested that it might mean he wouldn't destroy the Empire in the future. But when Rabbis heard this, he was very surprised and asked what she was saying, because he would burn everything to the ground as soon as she died. But Elaine was surprised, because the dragon said he had almost no strength left. Also asked, "Isn't he going to absorb the other one again?" This made the dragon very angry, and he scratched her back saying it shouldn't bother her. Elaine then asked why he was so fixated on destroying the country. Rabbis explained that the people had tricked him and locked him inside an egg for 500 years. He didn't understand how anyone could forgive such humiliation. The girl said that it was 500 years ago. And besides, she feels that using such power is not allowed for the Lord of Rabes. The dragon confirmed and said that he could die from giving up that power. But as they say, you have to pay a price to achieve your goal. Rabbis said that if she didn't like it, then let her try to turn him into a good dragon. The girl thought about it and realized that it meant she could raise a good and kind dragon from Lord Rabes. Elaine said it could stop it from consuming the other, meaning it wouldn't try to destroy the world. Dragon said that it was theoretically possible, and then asked if she thought he would change his grand plans just because of one human girl like her. The Lord Bara God has given everyone a special purpose, and those who met their Maker after fulfilling it can rest in the paradise lands of eternal joy and peace. The dragon continued. That's what the scriptures say. Up to this point, Elaine believed her purpose was to work in the refectory, the laundry room in the courtyard, and other places. However, her real purpose may be something else entirely. It could be the real reason she had a difficult childhood, or was sent to a temple monastery instead of her cousin, or going back in time after she was chosen as a sacrifice. It could be all about her raising a good and kind dragon from a wicked one. Elaine said that raising a dragon could take a long time, and when he grows up to be kind, she'll use her last wish and ask him for a free life. After a short silence, Elaine told the dragon that she thought only time would tell if he would change his mind or not. The dragon was surprised. He didn't know what the girl was talking about. The girl told him to then give her a chance to introduce herself properly. She bowed and said her name was Elaine Newton. After that, the dragon said he was Rabbis. Elaine said it was a pleasure to meet him and extended her hand to shake. The dragon said that he understood, and that she should hurry up and tell him her wish already, because she only had 2 left, and he could probably fulfill them before sunset. Elaine said that how could she hurry up and miss a good chance? She should think carefully before making a wish. Rabbis heard this and said that she could be cunning too. The girl said that at least she was cunning enough to realize that Lord Rabes had a backup plan. The dragon said it was all nonsense. And did she really think a holy animal was on the same level as them humans? Elaine said that since he was a holy being, he would be able to understand her desire to handle these desires carefully. Law growled, showing his displeasure. Then he sat back down on her shoulder. The girl smiled when she saw it, and thought she was sure he wasn't so bad. But more important to her now was that she must live in Earl Newt's mansion again until she was sent to a convent. Today is her 16th birthday, and she will enter the temple next March. Elaine thinks she should be grateful that she has another 1.5 years to leave this place. Then suddenly the girl stopped, and the dragon asked what was wrong. Elaine said she should probably wash off the blood before they went inside. The girl explained that the last time her cousin Ellie had been startled by the sight of blood on her forehead, her aunt had reprimanded Elaine. But the aunt did not punish the one who hurt her. The dragon was very upset when he heard that. He felt sorry for the girl, so he swung his paw, and the wound on her forehead immediately evaporated. He asked if that was normal, and also asked if they should go inside already. Elaine was in shock and couldn't believe that Rabbis had cured her. The The dragon said that if she was so amazed by something so insignificant, he thought she had yet to learn what it meant to be bound by a pact with a dragon. She thanked him, and the dragon lay back down and closed her eyes. At that moment, the dragon remembered the girl's words about being cunning enough to know that he had a backup plan. He thought that was certainly true, as if he hadn't had a backup plan originally. At first, Rabis had a simple plan. After being released from the cage, he was to wipe this empire off the face of the earth. But that all changed when he met Elaine Newt, because he felt in her the half of his heart that he had given to Lancer Aquinal almost 500 years ago. In other words, Elaine Newt is the reincarnation of his first contractually bound only person he trusted, and also the traitor who sealed it, the Archmage Lancer Aquinal. Once Rabis is free of the seal, he will first take his core, the half of his heart he gave to Lancer, and after that he will destroy the entire empire. It was a plan he had nurtured for 500 years. But when it hatched, not only did it not find its core, but it was also weakened after a long imprisonment. At that moment he realized that he couldn't continue like this. He had to regain his strength even if he had to use another source. So he spent the next 10 years looking for a source of other power. It was incredibly fast compared to the amount of time he'd lived in print. He knew it would be difficult to purge himself of the magic he had absorbed. But he was so caught up in his revenge that he gave no thought to the future. And when he became a little stronger, after a short time he told the Empire of its impending doom. But one day, by complete coincidence, he saw a sacrifice. He gave the humans 3 days to see how they fight amongst themselves, but they decided to try human sacrifice for the first time in 500 years. Rabis thought at that moment that it was a sign of the fall of their civilization. When he looked closer at the girl, he noticed the mark of a bound contract and the energy from his core. Oh heavens, that I shall live long enough to see such a thing, that scoundrel Lancer will be the one to set me free again, thought Rabis, looking at the girl. Lancer Aquinal. People put him on a pedestal, calling him a legendary archmage, but to Rabis, he is nothing more than a vile man who betrayed his trust. The world knows Lancer as a man, but he was originally a witch. During his execution at the stake, she made a contract with the dragon, right before he was burned. To fulfill her wish to live as a mage, Lancer Aquinal, the dragon gave her a portion of his core, the mana that is his heart. He also turned her into a man. But despite everything he did for her, Lancer ended up using the seal curse on Rabisa. Of course, the dragon wasn't going to put up with that. He was determined that when he was free, they would meet again. But while Rabis was imprisoned, he was able to use the rebirth curse on him. Even he couldn't imagine that his reincarnation with the dragon would become bound to him by contract and become a sacrifice. Rabis thinks she'll be surprised to see him. He is sure she will laugh at the whole thing. Then he turns to the girl and asks if they've met before. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about, since she was seeing him for the first time in her life. The dragon said she was trying to pretend she didn't know him, but Elaine said she knew he was the great lord of Rabis. She read it in a history textbook. When the dragon heard it, he was very surprised that it was written about him in the textbook. He tried to get her to remember by talking about suffering and breaking the seal. But the reincarnation of Lancer really didn't seem to remember anything. At that moment, the dragon thought that maybe it was for the best, because if he remembered his old life, he could use his contracted powers to taunt Rabis. Lancer, you are an enemy of the dragon, but he has no choice but to fulfill his wish. That's why he thought of giving you back your memories after he fulfills his last wish, and commit together, taking his core, in the most brutal way possible. So when the girl asked him not to destroy the empire, he thought it was even for the best. When he heard her first wish, he was able to purify his magic by going back in time to before he absorbed the other magic, as well as restore the missing energy by regaining his core. That's what he was thinking when he went back in time and hatched out of the egg. She looks just like Lancer when he first met her, so he thought he could anticipate her second wish, so it would be easier than he thought. But she'd refused, even when the dragon had said he'd kill them as a gift. The girl even offered to raise him to be a good dragon. Rabis really couldn't understand why she wouldn't kill them. After all, these guys hurt her all the time and cause serious damage. He speculated that it might be a side effect of the reincarnation curse. Now he was really concerned that the girl might die before she could say her last wish. It's a law of nature that the weak die sooner. But that would be a problem for the Rabbis contract. If the person bound to it dies a natural death before naming all the desires, the contract is voided. If it's a premature death, then the contract will remain in effect, and the dragon will have to fulfill his remaining wishes after the man's reincarnation. This means that if this girl dies prematurely, he will have to wait to meet Lancer's third reincarnation. Rabbis is frightened by even the very idea, and he decides to follow the girl until she says her last wish. But speaking of irony, to think that the reincarnation of the cunning Lancer Aquinal would be a half-wit, the dragon thought. For a while, as they entered the manor, things got interesting, and he asked the girl where they were specifically. Elaine said this was her room, and thought to herself that it was still exactly as she remembered it. As Rabbis scrutinized the room, he asked if she was laughing at him. The girl said she hadn't even started. The dragon said she should know that he could use his human form. Before his imprisonment, he had lived as a human and learned many things about the human world. He was saying this to the point that he didn't know how ordinary people lived, but he had never seen the great kind live in such a horrible old room. The girl said she knew what he meant. Placing the tray on the table, she replied that it could be said that she wasn't exactly an ordinary noblewoman, but still, she wouldn't starve on her birthday, thanks to the dragon. When Rabbis asked what she meant, the girl explained that in her past life she had missed dinner because she had let the others see herself covered in blood. Hearing this, the dragon asked again, "Is she sure she doesn't want to kill the people they had previously met?" Elaine said she was sure, and had already told him that. "Isn't she trying to act like a saint already?" The girl said it's unlikely because she's not doing it because she's a saint. She's just saying she shouldn't kill other people for any reason. Rabbis said he felt like she didn't fully understand, so he offered to show her how she could borrow powers from him. The dragon said it was pretty simple, then asked her to close her eyes and cast the spell while thinking of him. He called this spell Recuro Rabbes. The girl was surprised to hear it. The dragon then explained that his powers would then sleep in her, and she would smoothly discover the limits of what she could and could not fulfill. Elaine asked if she could so easily be allowed to borrow power from him. Wouldn't that devalue the 3 wishes? Rabbis said that all people jumped to strange conclusions at once. He told her not to worry because she would only be able to use a small part of his powers. She would realize right after she used it, so he recommended she try it right away. The girl sat down, closed her eyes, and began to think about Lord Rabbes. After that, she cast the spell the dragon had told her to cast. 3 guys are walking down the hallway, Martin, Ellie, and Damon. They get into a conversation about how Martin was sure he had seen everything, confirmed that she knew her well, and she was sure Elaine had erased everything. It wasn't like Martin kept saying, "So what happened?" It was incomprehensible to him. He saw Elaine picking up dinner and looking as if she had no wound. The guys could see badly, and next time they wanted to make sure they got to Elaine's place more accurately. Also expressed her opinion that she wanted to get somewhere too. The boys were so engrossed in the conversation that they didn't notice the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Lars came up to them and asked them what they wanted next. The boys screamed when they saw him, wiggling the back of his head. Martin tried to reply that, yes, that's right. Nothing substantial. They wanted to see who would throw the rock from them next. Lars heard that he would make sure to accurately hit someone, but Martin began to deny that he had said no such thing, mumbled to say something, that he was going to do something else. Lars ended up asking Damon why not tell him what really happened. Damon starts to answer badly too, saying that no, this all happened because of it's all Elaine's fault. Ends, he said. Lars, when he heard Elaine, he got very angry, but Damon kept saying that it was Elaine, that she was being so brazen, that she was just a disgrace to their family. Ellie, who started to argue too, that right, she should be grateful, but still so cocky. So Martin taught her a lesson. Finally, the whole truth came out. Lars interjected indignantly at Martin. By lesson, he meant that he had thrown something and hit Elaine. Martin got very tense, so much so that sweat broke out of his face. He had to tell the truth. It was just a small pebble, honestly. It didn't even hurt her, he claimed. You're 17 years old, you're an adult. When are you going to start behaving properly? Said Lars. What will your father and mother think when they hear rumors of your bad behavior? Eyes to the floor, I didn't know what to say to him. Remember your little brother and sister are looking at your actions. So be hard on yourself, Lars added finally. About if they've got it figured out, they can go. Left alone, Lars had thoughts of being angry if Elaine came to his room again. In front of everyone, she is silent and looks down at the floor. Well, she often comes into his room and mumbles something to herself. She doesn't tattle, she doesn't complain about everything around her, and Lars will probably just continue to ignore her. Sometimes he didn't understand why everyone reacted so violently when it came to Elaine. They just had to pretend she wasn't here. Going to his room, Lars thought it had been a hard day. He'd better send her away as soon as she came. Elin sitting on the chair after the spell was cast felt like she could do anything. Well, she must be realizing some amazing powers now. She needs to think about what she'd like to do right now, the dragon told her. Elaine pondered, wondering what she would want to do with Lord Rabis's powers. And then the idea came into her head that she was hungry. She imagined a delicious meal in front of her that she would really like to eat right now. I want to eat freshly baked white bread and hot soup and meat, Elaine said. But the dragon didn't really understand her. He frowned and expressed his opinion that was not something she wanted to spend his powers on. Well, Elaine was very hungry. That was the answer. How absurd! The dragon said indignantly. He couldn't believe that such a weak-minded little thing related to him had signed a contract. But Elin didn't consider herself weak-minded. Just, no, she told the dragon. Let's forget about it. Good. That's better than being a sly con artist all at once, the dragon concluded. Elin looked at the dragon, and it seemed to her that the Lord of Rabis was quite upset. Maybe she wished for something quite ordinary? Next time we'll have to give her something more serious to think about. Everything flashed and sparkled, and a bowl of soup and white bread appeared on the plate. Everything Elaine had asked for. She was very surprised, asking if something had happened. The dragon was shy to say. He didn't even know. It's not like he can't create something out of thin air, but he can remake existing things into something similar. And so it was that a regular chowder of soup was transformed into a graceful soup chowder. In magic, this is called transfiguration. If there was anything in the soup, he would have converted it into meat. There's nothing. Elin exclaimed, Lord Rabissa, so wonderful. It's delicious. It's the most delicious thing she's ever eaten. Donut. All of this was very much a surprise. How come it tastes good? It's not like he's meat. Yes, not meat, confirmed Elin. The soup is so good. Oh, it had been so long since she had eaten. The white bread broke. The piece that was so crunchy and smelled so good she nibbled with pleasure. Well then, since everything tastes good, the dragon lifted his face proudly and said, Honestly, transfiguration is amazing sorcery, isn't it, Elin? She of course confirmed that it was. The greatest dragon in the world. Having had enough to eat, Elin was very happy and excited about what was happening. Elin was very curious as to how it was that the Rabis Lord had grown so quickly and turned into an adult dragon in only 10 years. But that was obvious. You don't have to bring dragons down to the level of the rest of the animals, the dragon said. To us, the egg is simply the shell that contains our souls. And shapes change, but they're not related to our age. That means he can stay in the form of a little dragon, Elin said. After all, a dragon can not only be in the form of a little dragon, but it can also take the form of a human. And she immediately thought of what a dragon would look like in human form. The dragon thought to himself, wondering to himself what he would look like if he were human. Judging by the fact that a lot of people like his looks, he'd probably look pretty attractive, Elin said. She suddenly felt embarrassed and blushed after saying, attractive. What is he talking about? He probably meant to say that he looks attractive, not that he finds you arousing, meaning that you want to make love to him. Elin laughed and explained to the dragon. The dragon hesitated and looked at Elin, then asked, In her past life, did she want someone specific as her mate? No! Screamed Elin, though her face made it clear. Now she's lying, the dragon remarked. Lord Rabis, he can also recognize lies, Elin shared. And anyway, she wouldn't tell the truth. She must like someone, the dragon thought. It must have been a handsome man. She didn't like him just because of his looks, and even though she thought he was handsome, she didn't let the thought progress any further. Dragon didn't understand why. The only person in the Newton family who never hurt her. He never, even when she walked around him like a fool, raised his eyes to her. A cold young man, graceful and elegant in every way. So strong unlike her, so majestic and full of confidence. A man she couldn't help but love. However, and those words he said to her that he was excited for her to be a part of something, and she knew right away that she meant nothing to him. Really? Interjected the dragon. Is she saying that those feelings she had for him were just one-sided sympathy? Elin confirmed that it was. It's hard for a dragon to understand complex human one-sided sympathy. Elin asked him why it was hard to understand. She has to hide her feelings in front of someone, but the other person doesn't have to respond to them or build her expectations about a response from them. Is that fair to the other person? The dragon said. Elin sighed, because he might be right. A thought occurred to the dragon. Had she tried the mating dance by any chance? Elin asked in surprise. A mating dance? Oh, it seems to be something birds do, the dragon answered her. Well, or in other words, either way, he's asking if she's admitted to this man that she likes him. But Elin couldn't do that. Besides, there are a lot of people in the world who hide their real feelings, she said, scratching the back of her head. The more they talked about it, she thought, the scarier it got. The dragon doesn't have a very extensive knowledge of human interactions, but he's sure that Elin is right. Well, the sloth realized that the dragon was right, and all his words were spot on. It's just one-sided love. She had hoped he would be able to answer her, but she was disappointed when he realized it. Tears rolled from her eyes from all the thinking and talking. She thought it was all because she was being arrogant and didn't know her place. The dragon, who saw Elin's tears, immediately began to calm her down and tell her that she wasn't crying or upset. He didn't mean it, but the girl was very grateful to him that he understood the conversation and made her rethink the situation. And the dragon had an idea. He flew over and sat on Elin's lap, suggesting that he could help make that guy fall in love with her. Elin stopped crying for a moment and asked if he could control the human mind like a lord. Well, the dragon wasn't exactly in control. He wanted to say that he could teach Elin the art of seduction through magic. The dragon wanted to say with these words that Elin should seduce Lars with magic. After all, that's what seduction is used for, so she should stop crying. Elin was sure she didn't need to study it. There was no point in trying to make him her favorite. Besides, her feelings for him were long gone. So what kind of man is this Lars? Said the dragon. Elin took the dragon cub in her hands. It didn't care about him. She would really like to know why he disliked humans so much. Was it because of the mage that sealed him? The dragon replied back, yes, that story was another matter entirely. However, of all the people he had met, he had yet to meet a single one he could call decent. Elin asked, what about her? You young people are fine, the dragon replied. But I have seen that the older people get, the more unscrupulous they are. There are some people who have no conscience from childhood, Elin said. Her cousins that live here are Martin, Damon, and Ellie. Such were those of the convent who mocked her, and Larina, who rejoiced at her death, deeply despised her since childhood. She will do everything she can for him, Lord of Erebus, so that he can overcome his hatred of humans. She took the dragon in her arms, hugged him, and started stroking him. The dragon was not used to it. He did not understand what she was doing. At every touch and laziness, the dragon flinched. She thought he was uncomfortable, and she wouldn't pet him anymore. But it turned out that the dragon was very pleased, and he asked her to continue. When she stroked him, she had no idea that scales could be so soft on a dragon. Sloth leaned over and kissed the dragon's forehead. He became very indignant at the post and asked her what it was. Elin replied that it was a kiss on the forehead, which is considered a manifestation of intimacy in humans. He asked if they were close now, and she said, no, but she would really like them to be close, and she laughed. Dragon snuggled closer to Elin and said that it was still a contract between them anyway, and he didn't think there were people he would be closer to than her. He liked it so much that he asked for more hugs and kisses and stroking, for as long as possible. The next morning came. Lars woke up in his bed and looked. There was no one in the room. His first thought was that Elin had not come to his room today. There was a knock at Lars's room. He answered to come in. The door opened, and the butler came in, saying that Lars had not locked the door before going to bed. He thought that Elin might come in, but of course he didn't answer the butler. Instead, he said that he had simply forgotten to close the door. Lars hoped Martin hadn't lied when he said it wasn't anything serious. And if it was, everything should be all right. The butler walked over to the table where a cup stood and poured Lars some tea. As he sipped his tea, Lars read the order and reasoned that it seemed to him that the new head of the favela temple was a rather capable man. He greatly expanded his monastery during his 10 years in office. After his assumption of office, Johann Favela turned the whole temple on its head with his reforms, and found in the basement of the monastery a 500-year-old tomb with the remains of Archimagus Lancer Aquinal. The magic of the unholy dragon seal weakened because they didn't honor and care enough for the Archmage's tomb. The dragon then broke free and brought destruction to the entire empire. His statement created the feeling that the dragon could be released at any moment, and he was able to instill this fear into the emperor's heart. Thanks to such efforts, the monastery strengthened its position as a privileged temple in the imperial court and gained many privileges. In addition to all this, the favela temple capitalized on the desire of noble families to outdo each other and established a fashion for beliefs. Because of this, the monastery is now one of the most populated. I wonder how many noble children will be sent there next year, Lars thought. After all, being sent to a monastery is a common practice in the Kolean Empire, where religion is not in last place. To demonstrate their piety, each noble family sends a child to the temple to serve. If a boy, he's called a holy brother. If a girl, a holy sister. Such children carry the emblem of believers with them. They come to the temple when they are 15, 17 years old, and can return home only after reaching the age of 20. It's likely that Damon will go from the Newton family, excluding Lars, the heir to the family, as well as Martin, who will be too old for this, and Ellie, the only daughter in the lineage. Excluding Lars, the heir to the family, as well as Martin, who will be too old for this, and Ellie, the only daughter in the family. Lars had hoped Damon would spend most of his time at the monastery, where he could build personal connections. At times like this, he thought Elaine would have been more suitable for the role. At least she's smarter than the other kids. Her parents seem to despise the very fact of her existence, but Lars doesn't think it's necessary. Since they have Elaine, who is beautiful and intelligent, they must marry her off for the future benefit of their family. With the right jewelry and makeup, he is sure she will quickly achieve a reputation as a beauty in high society. They should bring her up and marry her off to a decent man. It might be a little late, but she should appear in high society in the next year or so, Lars reasoned. Although his mother and father would probably disagree, he thinks Elaine would be more valued in the marriage market than Ellie. Later, when Elaine comes to see him, Lars gives her some chocolate. Elin and the dragon entered one of the rooms. "Why are we here?" the dragon asked. "This is where your mom, Alina, lived when she was still alive," Elin replied. They entered this room because Alina was suddenly reminded of it. She hadn't expected it to be so clean. It seemed to Dragon that some person was being held hostage in this room. Why were they kept here? Thought the dragon. After all, Mom was a criminal. But no. Mom was her grandfather's bastard child. Everything was fine as long as Grandpa was alive, but after his death, power passed to her uncle, and that's when their suffering began. Why did he hate her? The dragon asked. Because of different mothers? Elin sighed and said it was better if it was just plain hatred. But it's still scary to remember those times, Elin continued. The name Marielle suddenly appeared in Elin's memories. She realized it was her destiny as soon as her father brought her here. Out of your mind! Marielle screamed at her. She heard back that no one would remember her if she lived here, keeping her head down in this room. And then he can give her everything and make her his. Marielle kicked him out, and said how could he think of such a thing? The memories were interrupted by the dragon saying, Wow, what a nasty uncle you had. I can't believe it. Indeed, Elin lied. Her mom wasn't her grandfather's own daughter. Bought her in a village where witches live. Bought? What does that mean? Didn't understand the dragon. It's just that Grandpa wanted to use magic in the family business, so he brought home her mom, the witch. They say he often used her mom's magic for his own purposes and called her his daughter to make it convenient to take her everywhere with him. Mom did not tell Elin about what she was doing. Elin knows that Mom was haunted by endless feelings of guilt and shame. But at the mere thought that with the money she received each month she could feed her family back home, she could not go against her grandfather's instructions. Then it appears that Elin is not related to the Newt family by blood. But in the end, no one was able to know the whole truth, Elin said. Grandpa died suddenly, as a result of a carriage collision. So my uncle never learned from his grandfather how things really were. Yeah, and her mom never asked her to tell that truth, saying that bad things couldn't come from the mere fact that she was a witch. The only thing 7-year-old Elin could do was keep the truth a secret and live in the Newton household without giving in. After all, now that her mom was gone, if Newt's family refused her, she'd really have nowhere to go. Her mom in laziness never told her who her father was, and it would probably be nice if she could find her father and live with him, rather than living like this now. But Elin doesn't know anything about her father. Perhaps she was afraid that her uncle would find him and kill him, so she kept her father's identity a secret. Even from Elin. After all, if her uncle started threatening Elin at such a young age, she would have told everything. There was no need to create unnecessary drama. There was already enough tragedy in the fact that Elin was born. What was the tragedy of Elin's birth? The dragon drawled. Her mom was originally a healthy woman, but after Elin she became very weak. That's why her uncle hates Elin, because she was born to someone else and killed her own mother. A storyteller, said the dragon. But what kind of brat is he who blames a child for the death of his own mother? If it wasn't for laziness, her mom would have died even faster because she would have ended her life by suicide, the dragon said. Elin's mom lived only for her. Elin asked the dragon if it was true, and he said, yes, because he can see the truth. But he was more importantly interested in the order, Elin, of how many memories and spells. If so, it still hurts at the mere thought of Mom, Elin said. In her memory, Mom was always sick. Here she came here, and she felt a little sad at the clear memories of her childhood. But she's actually very sad. And she came to this room because she really misses her mom. And she had come to remember the suffering of that day, the dragon thought. In fact, she thought, if she didn't want to repeat her unhappiness, she needed to be specific about what was tormenting her, and why she was experiencing such emotions, so that she could overcome them later. She had killed her own mother with her birth. With those words he had mocked her since she was 7 years old. After what you said, Rabis, she thought she didn't have to worry anymore. And thanks to Rabis, the laziness was much easier, she thanked the dragon. But the dragon said no thanks for the usual words. It was getting tiresome. After all, it seemed to Elin that the dragon had been worried about her all along. That's how she knew he wasn't an evil dragon. Someone's coming, said the dragon, who heard someone's footsteps. What's there to do? He'll violate her severely if he finds out she came here to this room, the dragon whispered to her. So he'll kill everyone here. Okay, he can hide them with his powers. The door opens, and her uncle enters the room. The dragon beckoned to Elin with its 2 paws and said that one must not even give a hint. Walking around the room, he said he should clean this place up too. Already walking over to the closet and opening it, he pulled out her mom's dress. Elin, when she saw it, she recognized it as the dress her mom had been wearing all along. Hanging there, she didn't even know. Her uncle held her mom's dress up to her nose and started sniffing, repeating, Marielle. He should have gotten rid of that motherless girl, despite her resistance. Should have died and Marielle should have lived. If only she could promise him by his side. If only she would be his, he kept repeating. Marielle, when she saw this, she herself didn't realize what she was seeing. That her uncle turned out to really want to kill her. The dragon flying up to Elin, pointing at her uncle with his wing, tells her, Come here, I have to kill that guy. Frowning, the dragon said, You can build yourself an angel from the death of such types on earth, and breathe easier. But Marielle, a kind soul, kept saying that you can't kill people, no matter what kind of people they are. Then the dragon got angry and said, So don't look. And his eyes glistened. He directed his power toward his uncle and said that the deceased would never have wanted this. Momentarily, Elin's mom's dress began to tear into tiny little pieces and evaporate. In a rage, he shouted, No! And couldn't understand what was happening. He opened the closet and wanted to grab another dress, but there was nothing there either. Only empty hangers and little bits of fabric flying around. Uncle was puzzled at what had just happened. He tried to grab these little pieces of fabric and yelled, Marielle! Furious, he slammed the closet door shut and strode toward the exit with the words, So there's no one in charge of this building. When the uncle left, Elin and the dragon were able to appear in the room without charms. He's gone to accuse someone again, the dragon said. Elin stood and judged that could a person change so easily. My uncle, who found the governesses in the hallway, started yelling at them and snapping at them that they were scum, couldn't even do their jobs. How can clothes rot in only 10 years? The girl governess couldn't understand what he wanted from her. Clothes? He says. She asks him, You mean the dress in the closet? It was in order yesterday, he says. Everything washed and ironed. He yelled at her again that she wanted to tell him he was lying. He pointed them toward the room and said, Go and check for yourself. With the dragon, these all shouted out of the room to see what was going on. Elin realized that they were now the reason the maids were being scolded, but the dragon kept insisting on his thought that, if he told her that, it would be better if they just killed him right away. After all, it's not hard to kill at all, the dragon Elin said. Rabis was originally an evil dragon who wanted to destroy an entire country. Surely human problems must seem pathetic to him, Elin thought. After all, just a short time ago she thought it would be easy to complete her mission. But now things were even harder.